This video is sponsored by Private Internet Access VPN. China has had a long and tortured history of conflict, rival warlords, external invaders, and internal civil wars. But the rivalry between the Nationalist Kuomintang and the Chinese Communists lasted longer than all of World War II and eventually tore the country apart. During World War II, both political paradigms spent almost as much time fighting each other as they did the Japanese, and the Allied nations were in a quandary as to which side needed the most support and to which group to allocate military resources. Who was Chiang Kai-shek? How did he become the nationalist leader of China? What was his effectiveness in World War II? What did the Allies think of him? How did he lose China to the Communists? Hello, I'm Colin Heaton, former history professor, Army and Marine Corps veteran, and welcome to this episode of Forgotten History. Chiang Kai-shek was born on October 31, 1887 in Finghua, Zhejiang Province, China, into a wealthy merchant and farming family. He was well educated and attended the Baoding Military Academy in North China and also military school in Tokyo, Japan. He served in the Japanese Army from 1909 to 1911, whose Spartan ideals he admired and adopted. Chiang was never enamored with the Manchu dynasty ruling the country, and he easily adopted a revolutionary mindset. Once the tremors of revolution erupted against the emperor, Chiang returned and joined in the fighting, and he also fought in the revolution of 1913 to 1916 once the emperor was replaced by the would-be replacement Yuan Shikai. Let me tell you of a way to hide your IP address from hackers. I use Private Internet Access, the world's most transparent VPN provider with over 30 million downloads. Private Internet Access hides your IP address and encrypts your internet connection. This way, it shields your digital life from the eyes of hackers, internet service providers, network administrators, and government censors. Streaming services such as Netflix, Amazon Prime, Disney+, and more have different library options based on where you are located, and some shows cannot be accessed if you are not located in the region. Private Internet Access VPN helps you overcome these restrictions by giving you the option of changing your IP, allowing you to gain access to websites and services that are only available in these locations, such as the submarine TV series Das Boot, only available in Germany and Switzerland. Well, not anymore. Just click on Germany or Switzerland on PIA and you're good to go. That's why I use Private Internet Access. Private Internet Access is available for all platforms: Windows, Mac OS, Android, and many more, and you can use one Private Internet Access subscription to protect an unlimited number of devices at the same time. So, click on this now and get 83% off on Private Internet Access. That's just $2.03 a month. And you also get 4 extra months completely free, giving you access to content worldwide and unlimited bandwidth. You also get a 30-day money-back guarantee. Following a temporary peace, Chiang left public life and lived quietly in Shanghai until 1917, during which time he joined the Qingbang, or Green Gang, which was involved in black marketeering and currency and commodities manipulation. With the Kuomintang, the Chinese Nationalist Party, coming into prominence, Chiang joined its leader Sun Yat-sen in 1918. Chiang liked Sun's idea of unifying China, which had devolved into many rival warlords who wielded a lot of local power. Sun Yat-sen began shaping the Nationalist Party into a Soviet Bolshevik-styled organization, and Chiang visited the Soviet Union in 1923 to study Soviet institutions, especially the Red Army. Upon his return to China, Chiang became the commandant of a Soviet-styled military academy in Whampoa near Guangzhou. Soviet advisors arrived to aid and indoctrinate the peasants, during which time Chinese communists were admitted into the Kuomintang. When Sun died in 1925, the communists became more prominent and tried to dominate the Nationalist Party led by Mao Zedong. But Chiang still had the power with the army behind him. Chiang tried to handle the communists to maintain Stalin's support, but that plan fell apart. Chiang finally launched a violent coup, expelling the communists as well as breaking up their labor unions, which saw support from Moscow fade away. Stalin now backed the communists and would continue to do so. Chiang then led his army north to combat the warlords, ending with his taking of Beijing, with the nationalist central government established in Nanjing. Around this time, Chiang married Sung Mai-ling, later known as Madame Chiang, whose family were Catholic, and he converted in 1930. Turmoil still existed as the warlords and communists, who sometimes fought each other, until the Japanese invaded Manchuria in 1931. Perhaps Chiang had his reasons, but he decided to ignore the Japanese threat to deal with the communists, who had recruited many of the former warlords. In December 1936, Chiang faced a coup of his own when one of his generals arrested him, called the Xi'an Incident, and supported by many of his soldiers. They believed that the military should be focusing upon fighting the Japanese instead of the communists. Most of the nationalists believed that they could convince the communists to set aside their differences and join them in the fight against the common enemy. Chiang agreed to their demands and united with Mao's communists in 1937, starting the Sino-Japanese War, which would last for over 4 years, as China fought alone until the Allies, primarily the Americans and British, began to assist. One of the main methods of support was in the form of the American Volunteer Group, a unit of American pilots, mechanics, ground support personnel who Chiang hired to fight the Japanese. Led by General Claire Chennault, they were effective in supporting the Chinese to slow down and even halt Japanese expansion to include flying missions out of Rangoon, Burma. But Chiang was not exactly respected among his paid mercenaries, nor the Allies, especially among some of the pilots who came to know him. One was legendary Marine Corps fighter pilot Gregory Boynton, who said, "I was also a little less than pleased with Chiang Kai-shek. Chiang was a legalized bandit, a crook big time, and everyone knew it. He got real rich off the war, and I know he was profiteering from all the Allied aid coming in. He kept bitching about needing more aid before he could commit more troops to help Stilwell. But Stilwell apparently had the ledgers showing that Chiang was getting better and more numerous supply shipments than he was, and he was the damned commander." Chiang had been stockpiling his weapons and ammunition, saving them for the final fight against the communists once the Japanese were defeated. Chiang also was very reluctant to support the Allies under American General Joseph Stilwell and British Field Marshal William Joseph Slim in the Burma campaign. The AVG was disbanded in July 1942 following war being declared by the USA against the Axis powers. Now the full weight of the Allies would come to bear against Japan. Chiang also had problems with his own people, and his relationship with the British had deteriorated. The British Commonwealth leadership were tired of trying to get him into the fight. The U.S. had brought a shipload of munitions and weapons into Rangoon Harbor aboard the USS Tulsa with instructions that the cargo was to be moved to the British, but Chiang had his men confiscate the shipment, and the controversy became known as the Tulsa Incident. Then, in an act of reprisal, some British soldiers decided to steal the weapons and ammunition back, really angering Chiang. This was just one of the final straws that caused the British to simply abandon Chiang and focus upon the Burma campaign as a singular focus in their own interests. China could rot. President Roosevelt decided that to entice Chiang to get more involved, he requested that Prime Minister Winston Churchill appoint Chiang as Supreme Commander of the Allied forces in China and Burma, or any title that he thought Chiang would agree to. Churchill agreed, but using Chiang only as a figurehead, not as the field commander of British forces, but someone was needed to keep Chiang in line. As a result, the decision was made to send General Stilwell, who was fluent in Mandarin and many dialects with many years of China experience. Franklin Roosevelt needed someone who could kick ass and get Chiang in the fight. General George C. Marshall agreed. Marshall wrote a personal letter to Lieutenant General Joseph Stilwell on April 29, 1942, stating, "Your leadership, especially under the peculiar conditions and difficulties of your authority and in a desperately critical situation, is a model for the Army." In essence, he was buttering him up to get him back into China. The assignment would give Stilwell 3 jobs: Chief of Staff to Nationalist leader Chiang Kai-shek, Commanding Officer of American Forces in China, and Lend-Lease Administrator. His title was Commanding General of the United States Forces in the Chinese Theater of Operations, Burma, and India. The orders did not address the specific duties implicit in these positions, especially his relationship with British theater commands. But Chiang knew that the British did not trust him, and that went both ways. So Chiang then requested that Stilwell take the role of overall commander of all forces in China and Burma, and if the British tried to alter that fact, he threatened to remove all Chinese soldiers from Burma proper. The British were rather upset at this proposal since they relied upon Chinese manpower to support their forces. To make matters worse for Stilwell, the China-Burma-India Theater of Operations was the least important theater in Roosevelt's or Churchill's eyes, so Stilwell was the last in receiving logistics and supplies. So Stilwell was, in effect, the gatekeeper in dispensing Lend-Lease supplies to Chiang, but he was very reluctant to do so after the British had supplied him for a year with no positive activity against the Japanese. The British saw Burma, very important, as a buffer into India, saving that colony, while Stilwell saw Burma as the gateway into China that could break Japanese control, if he had the support. Chiang offered Chinese troops to get the supplies. Field Marshal Sir Archibald P. Webble, British Commander-in-Chief in India, personally believed that the Japanese offensive in Burma was overextended and would only end in failure. Chinese forces were not required for victory. But he did accept 1 division from Chiang in a conciliatory gesture, although he doubted their sincerity, and he was not alone. Chiang's timid response to the Japanese while focusing upon Mao's communism was not helping the Allied cause. In fact, the British under Slim and the overall command of Lord Louis Mountbatten seemed to have little interest in supporting the Americans if Chiang was involved. Stilwell was well aware of the problems between Mao and Chiang's unreliability in stealing supplies from both the U.S. and British without any result. Stilwell made it clear that Chiang would get nothing on his watch. Much to Stilwell's surprise, the Chinese 200th Division held at Tunggu for 12 days against repeated Japanese assaults. Their stand represented the longest defensive action of any Allied force in the entire campaign. Even so, another major Allied withdrawal was inevitable. That was because when Stilwell ordered the Chinese 22nd Division in the south to relieve the 200th, exasperated and worn down from combat on the line, he received little response except excuses from the division commander. Despite Chiang Kai-shek's assurances to the contrary, Stilwell still had not been given the Quang Fang, or the Seal or Chop, as commander-in-chief in Burma. He had only been named Chief of Staff. The Chinese commanders, therefore, refused to carry out orders from Stilwell until they had been cleared with Chiang, who persisted in his habit of constantly changing his mind. Another major problem was Brigadier General Ord Wingate, commanding the 77th Indian Infantry Brigade, when, as a colonel, then later overall commander of the Chindit Commandos. Wingate's successes throughout 1943 were hard-won due to the failure of Chiang to support him. Expecting support, Wingate's force, after months of heavy fighting without relief and supplies, withdrew back into India, losing almost 1/3 of their force. Wingate was not a fan of Chiang. But Chiang's forces also failed to support each other. When the 200th Chinese Division withdrew without being replaced, it exposed the Burma Corps at Burma to Japanese attack. Beginning in March, the Allies started their north march, with the British and Chinese blaming each other for their repeated reverses. Due to Chiang's lack of support, Lashio fell on April 29th, completing the Japanese blockade of China by closing the Burma Road. China was now sealed off. Stilwell ordered an emergency evacuation. Part of the Chinese force managed to withdraw east into China, but 3 divisions headed west into India. Determined to begin a renewed defensive effort, Stilwell sent part of his staff ahead to prepare training bases in India, and on May 26 the campaign ended as the last of the Allied forces retreated into India, joining Wingate's depleted forces. Stilwell was furious, as were Slim, Mountbatten, and even Churchill. Then Chiang, seeing that Stilwell was not a man to be bullied, protested for 2 years to Washington to have Stilwell removed as the American commander, which finally happened in October 1944. Chiang was not distrusted by everyone. Some had faith in him that he would come around, and the British push in 1945 from India and the amphibious landings on the coastal islands would eventually see a link-up with the Americans liberating Burma. But despite these positive events, Chiang's fragile government was falling apart, which grew worse as the war progressed, and once the war was over, the Nationalists resumed their fight against the Communists. The start of the Civil War in 1946, which was bloody, but even worse, the new U.S. President, Harry S. Truman, was not about to get involved, not with Chiang's history of bad decisions and wavering loyalties. Chiang's gangster-like approach and dictatorial style, as well as his rampant nepotism within his government and incompetence as a political and military leader, saw many former nationalists defect to Mao's communists. Chiang's lukewarm handling of the Japanese had lost him the prestige and support among the Chinese population that the communists ultimately gained by their fierce anti-Japanese resistance. Mao and the communists had fought a ruthless campaign against the Japanese, mostly without much Allied support with the exception from the Soviet Union. But their resistance impressed the Chinese people, who saw the communists as their saviors and the nationalists under Chiang as thieves. There was a good reason to feel that way. Chiang could also not account for millions in gold he had been paid to recruit, train, and equip his army, which were largely forced to rely upon American and British donations. Nationalist morale plummeted. The morale and effectiveness of his armies had decayed during their enforced passivity in southwestern China, while the communists had built up a large, battle-hardened army on the strength of their appeal to the Chinese nationalist sentiment. By 1949, Chiang had lost to the communists and the People's Republic of China was established. The nationalists relocated to Formosa, which they renamed Taiwan, where he established a mild dictatorship which was supported by the US and UK. Despite his well-known corruption and incompetence, which was only salvaged by his intelligent and more competent wife, Madame Chiang, he received Western aid and built up a growing economy over the next 20 years. Under the Dwight D. Eisenhower administration, the United States signed the existing defense agreement with the new government of Taiwan, but the warming of relations with China during the Richard M. Nixon administration in 1972 endangered Taiwan's future. But time caught up with Chiang, who died on April 5, 1975 in Taipei, Taiwan, a very rich man, and he was succeeded temporarily by Yin Chiakan, who was replaced by Chiang's son, Chiang Ching-kuo, in 1978. And the legacy continued. So, click on this now and get 83% off on private internet access. That's just $2.03 a month. And you also get 4 extra months completely free, giving you access to content worldwide and unlimited bandwidth. You also get a 30-day money-back guarantee. Thank you for watching this episode of Forgotten History. If you liked what you saw, please click like, share, and subscribe. And if you would like to assist with the ever-increasing cost of production, please consider becoming a channel member and joining our Patreon page. Please check out our merchandise store. And thanks for watching.